Hello everybody and welcome to a new luck poker video. Today I'm going to review for you 4 hands from a new student of mine. So first of all, as I mentioned, these hands were not played by me but from one of my students, and I thought they had some interesting points in here and I thought it was worth to put on the channel. So let's start with the action. We have King Queen off on the button and we choose to open 2.5, pretty standard. The small blind calls. The small blind was a recreational player, and we have the big blind, a regular, who chooses to squeeze here. Hero here chooses to call. I think you could also fold already here. Usually big blind should have a polarized 3-betting range, and versus this range it's fine to call sometimes King Queen off, but in this situation I think his range is going to be a bit more linear, meaning that he is either squeezing for value or is anyway trying to isolate himself with a weak player on the small blind, which probably means he doesn't have things like King 5 suited, for example. And because of that, I think we should fold a bit more hands like this, which are easily dominated. Plus, of course, by calling, we don't close the action. Small blind can still shove, and you're just going to waste these 11 big blinds, which is going to be a bit of unfortunate. So yeah, I think all in all, already pre-flop, we should just fold here. Of course, small blind is a bad player, and it's nice to play with bad players, but I don't like to play King Queen off in a 3-way 3-bet pot anyway, and especially versus a range which probably is stronger than it should be. So yeah, I think folding pre-flop is probably better in general. Anyway, the small blind calls as well. The flop is King 5-6, so not that bad for King Queen. What happens here is that the small blind block shoves, which is okay, it may be many things. I think at this shove, we're not super happy, but we could still call, in the sense that villain can obviously have 6s, 5s, maybe something worse, but still strong, like King 5, 5-6, things like this. But he can also have some weaker king. He could have 7s playing randomly. He can have 7-8. He can have many things. So I think if big blind folds, it's okay to call here probably. I mean, not super happy again, because when a recreational player does this line, is usually unbalanced toward value. But still, I think in this situation it will be okay to call. But what happens here is that the regular calls the shove, and hero here chooses to shove, which I don't like at all. Again, it would have been fine if you just call the first shove, but we need to think that the big blind is not calling light here, because still he has hero behind, and he's not gonna call with jacks, he's not gonna call with queens, knowing that there is a player with 120 big blinds behind and who could have certainly decent hands. So I think here it's just better to fold. It looks kind of tight, because you may be tempted to say King Queen here is definitely my top range. I'm not going to, let's say, have that frequently 5s and 6s, maybe yes, who knows, but King Queen is still on the high part of my range. How can I fold it? Am I not folding every single time if I fold in this? The answer is yes, you are. The point is that we don't care about folding our top range here if our top range is not good. Simple as that. Because first of all, we are not going to be exploited. I mean, villain 2 is calling a shove. He literally cannot exploit us this way, because it's not calling extra light here, because we may be folding King Queen. He still need to have something, what I'm saying, because he's calling a shove, so he must have something. And because of that, I think here, yeah, I think it's a safe assumption here to say that we can fold basically every single time here King Queen, and I think it's gonna be good enough. Unluckily, villain 2 calls, so when he calls our shove, of course we're 100% sure we are dead, and at the end small blind had King 6, and villain 2 has pocket aces, no surprises here. So I think, you know, you should be very careful with these hands, because it's very easy to say, well, it's just a cooler, how unlucky am I hit a king, he has aces, the other guy was lucky with king 6. But we can see here two main mistakes: the call preflop, which I think is not that good in this situation, and the call to the shove and call from the villain 2, who had a strong range. So yeah, I mean, this hand is not a cooler, it is probably a mistake, and you should be very careful not to just say, well, I had top pair, top kicker and a squeeze spot, top pair good kicker and a squeeze spot, and what could I do? Because yeah, you could definitely fold. Let's move on to the next one. Queen 10, this also is an interesting one. We open from the small blind, which is of course standard. The big blind chose to call. Not too many info on the guy. Flop is king ace 7. We choose to overbet the flop. Villain calls. We choose to overbet again on the 8 of hearts on the turn. Villain calls. On the 6 on the river, we just shove and villain calls. And well, I will not show you the showdown because it's to influence our thinking processes. So, first of all, overbet on the flop. Is it fine? Is it not? On a theoretical perspective, overbetting this flop is totally fine. If we take a solver solution, I will open here GTO Wizard, you will see that on this specific board, in this specific dynamic, queen 10 off, it's pretty much an overbet when you choose to bet, and that's perfectly fine. So the sizing on the flop in theory is not that bad, but I would say that in practice, especially at the lower stakes, you should try to understand how the field is reacting to this overbet, and then to play in an exploitative way, punishing eventual deviations from what is optimal. What am I saying? For example, here, let's see the overbet, and let's see the defending range of villain. What should it be? As you see, villain should fold sometimes a king, a weak king. It should call all aces, of course. It should call sometimes a king. It should fold sometime, not too frequently, a king. It's fine, he folds a 7 most of the times. Well, actually, you should still call it a 7. Could fold 7, 8 off, for example. But yeah, you know, 7 is start being folded quite a bit. Even here, you see, you know, there are some folded 7s. What else? Villain should call with his gut shot. Can start folding some queen 10 sometimes. Look that he is also folding actually kings with offsuit kings without any kind of backdoor flush draw. So, you know, this defending range is kind of tight. I would say that most players, I mean, not most players, but it's very likely that at least in hands like king, queen off, and king jack off, the average opponent is going to call at least on the flop to this slight small overbet. So, if anything, I think that the field here is over calling rather than over folding, because I don't think they're folding more hands than what is optimal here. I think if you overbet, they're going to defend pretty much like this, maybe folding less even. So if you think that the player pool is going to overcall here, overbetting as a bluff is not that effective, in the sense that in a situation in which we expect our opponent to fold too few to our bet, we should bluff less. So an exploitative way to play this hand here would be to keep overbetting with our value, because again, we expect more calls than what is optimal. But when we bluff, we should probably not use the overbet, because it's not gonna work that much. And if we bet small, for example, well, here is not, of course, totally accurate because we chose different sizings. But you know, if you bet small, this is what our opponent should defend and how it should defend. And I think, you know, there are chances that our opponent is playing poorly versus this size more than he is playing poorly versus the overbet. Because here maybe he, of course, he's not going to fold more to that 1/3 pot bet. Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe some very weak hand like queen 3 suited he might fold all times, but okay, whatever. But also he's probably not raising enough. He's probably not raising enough with his aces. He's probably not raising enough with things like the 7. So is probably, you know, we see that versus a 1/3 pot bet, our opponent is probably gonna defend more passively than he should, and even maybe less, while to the big bet he's probably defending as he should, maybe even a bit looser. So in a situation like this, what I'm saying, finally I come to the conclusion, is that if you expect the field to react this way, it's perfectly fine for you to play unbalanced and like over betting your value hands and betting with 1/3 pot, for example, with your bluffs. It works fine. It's a very simple exploit of what you expect the field doing here. So be careful when you do that, because again, it's very easy to say, well, you know, the solver overbets here 125%, so I should do the same. It's totally fine. And yeah, I mean, you're not losing money for sure. I mean, you're not doing something which is minus EV, but it's probably not your best option. So here I would say that it's important that you have an overbetting range on the flop. It's important that you know how it works, but it's also important that you know how to deviate from what is optimal and why and when. So here I say that, theoretically speaking, again, it's perfectly fine to overbet this hand. In practice, I think you should do more overbets with value here than with bluffs. Villain calls, and the turn is the 8, and once again here we chose to overbet. This is probably even a theoretical mistake, in sense that even if you see here the overbet on the flop, we see that when villain calls and the 8, I think it was an 8 of hearts, let me see. Yeah, the 8 of hearts. When the 8 of hearts hits, we are typically not going to continue with things like our gas shots, and that's pretty common. We do not overbet twice with a weak draw. If we have a weak draw, typically we just check and fold. We keep overbetting with 7s, and they have a pretty good blocker. 8s if we have that as well. We keep overbetting some value and maybe some decent draws, like, you know, 10 jack is sometimes overbet, because now he has a double gutter, you know, we have straight with the queen and with the 9, but weaker draws are bet much less. Even jack 9 suited is mainly overbet when you also have the flush draw going there. So yeah, I think be aware that to not overbet too much. You may say that, you know, I just told that villain is calling too much on the flop, maybe, probably, and then maybe it would make sense to overbet more on the turn. The point is that, yeah, I mean, he's calling too much on the flop, but not way too much. I don't think you should get too much out of the line on the turn, because he maybe calls a bit too much. So be very careful here. It's very easy to get to get blown away and start just pewing, and it's very easy. So I don't like the overbet on the turn. On the flop, I mean, again, I don't like it even on the flop, given how the pool at an L25 probably plays. But also, while on the flop it was okay, on the turn I think it becomes a mistake. On the river, villain shoves, again, still, I don't think in general, if your opponent called you to overbets, he's going to fold that much on the river. It's unlikely, so I will do it only if you have very good blockers. The problem here is that queen 10, they look like good blockers at a first glance, but they are totally not. Why not? First of all, we may say we block 9-10, but who cares if you block 9-10 when villain is probably folding 9-10 on the flop? I mean, we overbet the flop. Why the hell he would have 9-10? It's pretty pointless to block 9-10. It's not part of his range anyway. And we may also say that we block ace queen, but again, ace queen is probably not a part of his preflop range, because he just called preflop our open on the small blind, and ace queen is almost always a 3-bet in this situation, from most players at least. So blocking ace queen also is not that relevant. And because of that, I mean, you know, we don't have particularly good blockers. It's much better here to bluff if you block a pair, because if you block a pair, you know, you block 2 pairs and sets, which is what is going to call you more frequently when you place a triple barrel like this, like over push. So it's a bit too much, you know. If he had something like an 8 or a 7, it would be fine probably to just shove, especially with the 7. It's a very nice blocker. Or even if sometimes you end up like here with a king, I don't know if you do that frequently, but you know, it would be okay. but not with queen 10. So yeah, I think this hand was a bit too lag. Even if the name of the channel is lag poker, this was a bit too lag. And villain had a7, and unlikely we gave him a stack. So this is another example of a hand in which, you know, you may say how unlucky you are. They always have 2 pair plus when you do something like this. The point is that you should not do something like this typically, and you know, it's up to the flop, it's okay if you want, but then from the turn on we just spewed. So be very careful to these things. Let's move on. We have now king queen suited, and we have a recreational player who opens from the cutoff. We choose 3-bet, which is totally fine, of course, and our opponent calls. This flop hits, and I think, you know, it's perfectly fine here to check. First of all, we do not have 3 streets of value here, and I don't think we need to bet range in general on this situation, versus a bad player as well, especially also. So we have a hand which is medium value, because we have a second pair, pretty solid because, you know, it's a pair of queens, and we also are protected on clubs. And having the clubs is also bad, especially the king of clubs is bad, because if we bet, we block a lot of hands which are going to call us from behind. You know, we block in jack, we block in 10, we block clubs, of course. So this hand plays pretty poorly as a bet, in my opinion, and I would just check and give my opponent the opportunity to bluff. There is no need to bet this one. Hero bets here, half pot also. I don't like even the sizing versus a bad player with these blockers. If you bet here, if you really want to bet here, I would bet really super small, being sure villain calls with a 7 and maybe with any pair and with any kind of weak throw, backdoor you could have. So yeah, I don't like the bet. I like even less the medium size bet, because, you know, we don't achieve much, to be honest. We are not putting our opponent in enough troubles, and we are not letting him do some mistakes. We really should try to think at the line which is going to let's say make our opponent's life the hardest. And I don't think this is in general, because if he falls to this sizing, we were way ahead here. While if he calls, well, you know, we're probably not playing that well versus that kind of range. So here villain calls, turn is a blank. Again, hero shoves, which I don't like. I mean, if we're not gonna check fold anyway, so if we check, it's going to be a check call. But the point is that if you shove here and villain had chose to call you on the flop with 10 jack, in 10, things like this, he's probably gonna fold on the turn, and you don't want that, because those are the main hands you beat at this point. Villain is not going to fold an ace, so you cannot bluff this hand in a certain way, and if villain is as an ace, you are not ahead enough to place a value bet with this hand. So here I prefer to check, because if you check, you give your opponent the chance to make a mistake and shove king jack. I'm not speaking a mistake theoretically speaking, a mistake if you consider your specific hand and his specific hand. Of course, if he has 10 jack and he shoves and you have a better hand, he's doing what we can call a mistake, of course, if we see the cards. But that's what we should do, basically, you know. We should try to force our opponent to mistakes. And and here, I mean, you know, it's very easy for villain to play perfectly here. He's gonna fold if he's behind, he's gonna call if he's ahead, and, you know, easy peasy. If we check instead, we give him the opportunity to make some mistake and to win the stack maybe. So here we shove, villain calls. Villain in this case has ace jack, so too bad. Let's move to the last hand. This also is something which I sometimes see at the micro stakes, which is not having a clear plan in mind. You will see in a moment what I mean. So here opens from middle position. We have the call from the cutoff, a recreational player, button squeeze, and hero chose here to call. I mean, it's fine. You can also forbet sometimes. Calling is okay. Sometimes by calling we force villain 19 to shove given his stack, and in case villain 20 folds, we can call and probably be in a good shape with a lot of that money in the pot. So I mean, I don't mind the call preflop, it's okay. Plus pocket tens is not that easily dominated, if not from overpairs. So I mean, it's much better to call tens than king queen off, as we saw in the first hand, in my opinion. let's say we have more implied odds also when you hit a 10 here, it may be kind of easy to get some value, while if you hit a king or a queen in the other situation, maybe not. So anyway, unlikely the cutoff folds. We are heads up. The flop is 7 deuce 5, which is of course good for our hand. Hero chooses here to check raise the flop, which I think is fine sometimes. You know, pocket tens here needs certainly protection. If villain folds, you are not that unhappy, and there is a lot of the money in the pot. So villain folding is definitely not a bad output for this hand. And if villain calls, of course, we could also still have some hand to beat. You know, villain could have 8s and 9s, for example. Villain can certainly have 2 hearts. We don't have a heart, so villain can call us and give action with 2 hearts. Maybe villain can also have a backdoor with overcards. Who knows? This depends on our image. If we have an aggressive image, as we should, villain could choose to defend something like, I don't know, ace king with the ace of hearts. And of course, we should have a plan. That's the most important part, because when you are check raising this hand, we are pushing the variance up, and we are putting ourselves in a situation in which, if it is a cooler and villain has jacks, queens, kings, aces, we are probably going to lose a stack, unless the turn is something which saves us some money, some freezing card. But you know, you should accept that. You know, you choose to check raise these pocket tens. Be aware that you are putting your 130 big blinds at risk, and it's fine, because you know, we said there are good points in doing it. We can get team value, we can get protection. In the long run, it's certainly something which is not that bad. But you know, be aware of that. Do not check raise because you think you need protection and then don't know what to do, because that's what exactly happens here. Villain calls, 9 of spades hits, which is a wonderful card. This is maybe one of the best turns you could hit, because apart from pocket nines, you are probably still ahead, and this is an action card. Villain could have 8-9, villain could have 2 spades, villain could have 2 hearts and still stay in the pot or be more aggressive, because it thinks you may also be weak in this situation, or you know, it's not a bad card at all. Pocket nine, the 9 of spades. It's one of the best, and probably the best solution here would just be to shove at this point, giving villain bad timing. Let's say a tough time when he has something like 8-9. If he has 9-10 of hearts, of course, it's gonna be something which he's gonna call. We're gonna anyway be in a decent shape, and you know, it's pretty easy here to shove. But what hero does, he checks, villain bets, even pretty smallly bets, and hero chose to fold here, which I think is pretty bad, because if we are check folding on one of the best cards we have in the deck, it means our plan wasn't that great. So yeah, be aware of this. So before placing a check raise on the flop, try to think, what will you do next turn or river, because you need to have a good plan. You mustn't check raise just because it's the easiest thing to do on the flop, and then who knows. So be aware of these common mistakes. That was it. I hope you liked these hands. And if you have some hands, actually, you can also send me in the email francesco@loseaggressively.com. Send me the text file, and I will be more than happy to make a review like the one I did here to my student. Of course, I will take away your nickname as I did here, so don't worry about privacy. And well, I hope you send something. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you next time. Bye.